All right, good morning, everyone. Well, we go ahead and get started. Welcome to our meeting. Thanks a lot for facing the fierce San Diego precipitation to get out here today. I know how difficult it can be when things turn as ugly as it is out there. Why is this not advancing? All right, I'd like to extend a special thanks to the Sanford Burnham Prebys Medical Discovery Institute for letting us use the auditorium. They've certainly been wonderful supporting our organization. The principals of the IPCSG organization are Bill Lewis, who's outside setting up our nice lunch. He's the president and does the newsletter summaries. We have Jean Van Vliet here, the director and treasurer. Steve Pendergast in the front row, secretary and newsletter editor. Bill Manning, our director and videographer behind the camera. Myself, Aaron Lamb, facilitator. And John Tassi, our webmaster. And I'd like to take a moment to just give everybody a round of applause for all of the work that they do for this organization. Yeah, you might see my face up here once a month, but these are the guys that do 10 times as much work as I do. And of course, there's you, 900 plus members from inside as well as outside of San Diego and California. Are there any newcomers today? Anyone here for the first time? One? Okay, all right. Well, please do make sure to fill out and hand in that cover sheet before you leave. We'll then give you a call to discuss your situation and see what we can do to best help you out. The information kit that you would have received contains articles and links to articles and either it contains articles and booklets or directions on how to get those via our website. And let's do a round the room, all hands. Welcome to raise your hand if you're here for the first time. I think there was one person here for the first time. And how many have been recently diagnosed in the last year? Yeah, we got a few people like that. Have had PCA for 1 to 4 years. All right, a few more, 5 to 10 years. Yeah, pretty even distribution today, 11 to 15 years. Quite a few there. And how about longer? Gene, how long? 20 years? 22 years. Gene, you've been displaced. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the key thing here, especially for you newcomers, is that, this is certainly a disease that you still have a long life ahead of you. When it comes to cancer, they say prostate cancer is the one to get. Slow growing with wonderful treatments these days that will certainly prolong your life. How many are on active surveillance or have been on active surveillance in the past? Quite a few. How many have had surgery? Radiation? Quite a few. ADT and hormone therapy? Quite a few. Chemotherapy? Gene here. New treatments such as focal or immunotherapy, Provenge, so forth. Excellent. And how many people have had recurrence? Yeah, it is something that we deal with. And how many are undecided with what their future treatment is going to be? That's why we're here, making some decisions for the future. So I should have pointed out to especially the newcomer, anybody that is has questions about what to do next, these people sitting around you have a wealth of experience. So, go up and chat with somebody who raised their hand that has experience with a treatment that you're considering and ask them what their experience and opinions were. And we are on Instagram. Bill, do you happen to know how many people were up to following us?
I think it was over 500. I don't remember the number.
Yeah, well, that was 500 a couple of months ago. I keep on forgetting to check. But please do follow us on Instagram. The link is right there, IPCSG3. And do like some of the posts that we have up there that will help us get our message out to more people. And we do also have a video. Let's see, will that play? Yeah, I know. We need to take Sharon's number off of there, but it's a great video for trying to get the message out that every man needs to get their PSA tested, or every father or every grandfather, for those others that see it. Our support to you comes in the way of the website, www.ipcsg.com. Hopefully you've all visited that and see what a wealth of information there is there. .org. What did I say, .com? Sorry, .org. You can find us also on YouTube. We have all of the prior meetings recorded and available to see. Those includes chapter links so that you can jump right to the section where the doctor or other presenter is speaking if you want to skip over my pretty face for 5 or 10 minutes. We also have the newsletter, which comes out the week before the meetings, that Steve so graciously puts together. You can also access those on the website, but you should also be able to get them by email, and we can send them to you on paper in the mail if you request. Our meetings, as you know, are the third Saturdays of every month except for December. And we do have 2 hotlines for people to call if you're stressed out about trying to figure out what your next step is in treatment options. Bill and Jean have been gracious for taking hotline calls. And we do need volunteers. We need people to suggest and recruit new speakers, as well to share your experience. Those of you who were here last month, we had a fantastic roundtable with 3 of our members sharing their experience. So please do contact us either by the hotline number or through the website if you'd be interested in either of those. Yeah, if you have any ideas, please do share them. And what's actually quite nice is we've somehow done pretty well with having remote speakers, and so we're not just limited to the Southern California area. We can, if there's somebody from anywhere in the country, and it can be quite easy for us to be able to get those people to join us now. Now, I'd like to remind everyone of our support group's purpose. We share patient-focused experience on becoming your own case manager through informing, networking, and caring. We're a group of experienced participants, but we are not medical professionals, and any sharing by any one of our group may not be a substitute for your own medical counsel. And we do need your support. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, so we have no medical or religious affiliations. Our largest costs are the website, advertising, and mailings. So please do consider making a donation. You can do that either directly with the baskets that we're passing around right now or online via PayPal. You can also send a check in the mail to the P.O. box you see listed here, and that address is also available on the website. This organization is extremely useful, especially when it can take 2 to 4 months to get in to see some of these specialists, including ones that aren't even covered by our own individual insurance. So I hope you consider the value that these presentations provide, as well as for those watching online to make a nice donation to the organization. Next month, we're going to have Dr. Raina McKay, professor, medical oncologist of UCSD Urology. She will be discussing advances in prostate cancer treatment. I probably don't need to tell you what a fantastic opportunity that's going to be to ask Dr. McKay some questions. She was, my personal oncologist, so I have a special place in my heart for her. She was absolutely wonderful in saving my life, so I do encourage you to attend. And she always when she comes to speak with us just has fantastic information to share. For today, we have Dean Hall, author, and he's going to be giving us a talk called Swimming in Miracles. He's written a book called The Wild Cure: From Death to Life on Oregon's Longest River. Now we're going to, he is joining us remotely, and I ask that we hold all of the questions until the end, then we'll have a nice Q&A session where I'll run around with the microphone and take turns asking Dean questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Dean. Please go ahead and you can start sharing your screen again.
I'm Dean Hall. I am just a regular guy, but I've had some pretty wild experiences. My life has been a great adventure, as I'm sure all of ours have, if
Hey,
you've
Dean?
lived as long as I have, or even longer. And the story I'm going to share with you today, spoiler alert, it had a pretty good ending, but it was not fun to live. Uh, a lot of times when I give these speeches, people, especially when they hear about my first swim, the swim of Willamette River, Oregon's longest river, it's 187 miles long, they say, boy, wasn't that fun? And I tell them, I was an active cancer patient swimming 187 miles in 40-degree water. What about that sounds fun? But it did turn out well, and I do have some really fun memories. Today, I'm going to share how I was drowning in despair and went from that to swimming in miracles. So my life's been a great adventure. I was drowning in despair, and I went from swimming in miracles. One of the reasons my life's been a great adventure is I kind of hit the lottery, as far as I was concerned, and still am, with my parents. Both of my parents grew up here in Oregon, and Oregon in the 60s and 70s when it was an adventurer's playground. There were more adventure athletes back in the 60s and 70s up here than there were hippies or new age uh, sorts of folks. It was really a fun place to grow up. Both of my parents were mountain climbers. If you look on the left side of the screen, that's them in 1952. And I was just talking to my mom yesterday. Uh, she was a sophomore in college when this picture was taken. And in 1952, number one, a lot of people weren't climbing mountains, much less Oregon's tallest mountain, Mount Hood. And number two, women weren't doing this. And so I grew up watching this tiny little Swede mix it up with the men and go vertical many times. And I just thought it was normal. As a matter of fact, all of our vacations, but most of our weekends were spent hiking and climbing the Columbia River Gorge or going up into the Cascade Mountain Range. It was not unusual for me to come home and ask kids on Monday, hey, what'd you do for the weekend? And they said, oh, well, we were bored. We watched the Scooby-Doo marathon. What did you do, Dean? I said, well, I climbed Mount Hood. what, what are you doing? And so for me, it was quite a wonderful life. A lot of times when people ask me, why did you choose to have that approach to your cancer recovery? It kind of was not an option. It was so deeply embedded and dyed in the wool and the fabric of who I am. I just thought when people hit challenges, they did something that made their life more adventurous. They got their mind off of themselves and onto something bigger and better than they are. And one of my favorite quotes is by Yvon Kennard, the guy who started Columbia Sportswear. It's not an adventure until something goes wrong. And in my life, things went very wrong. All my growing up years, all I did was climb and hike and swim across alpine lakes and in rivers. And then I just fell in love with soccer. And I saw a t-shirt the other day an old guy was wearing that kind of sums up my soccer career. It says, the older I get, the better I was. But I got so involved in soccer, I got on the Olympic development team. I was on the first Nike sponsored youth team. They took us all over England and we got to study under the Premier League guys. And it was a real lesson in humility. We thought we were really great. And then we got over there and we played the Premier League's B teamers, and they made us look like Bobo the Dancing Bear. So for a bunch of young teenage guys who were very egotistical, it was a real good lesson in humility. so I kept playing soccer, had scholarships all around America and Canada. And on a lark, I picked a small Christian college in Kansas. One of the reasons was I had some good church camp experiences, and I thought this would be like year-round church camp, only I get college credit. It didn't turn out that way. But also, I'd never been to Kansas, and I didn't know, I knew there weren't mountains in Kansas, but I didn't know there weren't hills or trees or rivers. I didn't know there were lakes unless they were man-made. When I landed in southwest Kansas, down by the Oklahoma border, I felt like I'd been dropped on the moon. Still made the best of it and was having a lot of fun playing for the soccer team there when I met my first wife. And she was just so adorable that I fell wildly and madly in love. And when we decided to get married a couple years later, she looked at me and she said, "You know, Dean, I love you, but I'm not moving up to Oregon. I'm close to my family. If you love me and want to marry me, you're going to have to move down here. I didn't go up there. You came down here, so I think it's only fair." Well, I came back for a while, and all the beauty of Oregon just didn't seem beautiful without Mary. I was young and in love. And so I told all my friends that I was putting myself in exile for love. And if you've ever been to Kansas, you know that's not as sarcastic as it sounds. And so I moved down there, and we made a good life. We worked really hard. I worked 2 jobs till I was 42. I taught public school. I taught American history and art. And then at nights, I was a therapist and was trying to build my private practice. Things were going really well. And my private practice was burgeoning to the point where I had to quit teaching. I was doing that full time. And I knew I was tired, but I was working 80-hour weeks. I was working really hard. I was writing a weekly advice column as well that was sent out to several small town newspapers around the Midwest and US. And I was really building my career. I was building a speaking career as well. And so I was just a busy guy. Being tired didn't seem outrageous until my doctor, and I lived in a small town of 12,000. So a doctor making a house call wasn't as big a deal there as it is nowadays. And he was a really good friend too. And so he often stopped by, and he stopped by and he says, "Hey, Dean, I need to talk to you." And I said, "Well, what's going on, Aaron? What can I do for you?" He's like, it's not what you can do for me this time. It's what I got to tell you. Sit down. And so he sat me down. He said, "You've got leukemia, and it's really bad." He said, "We don't know what to do because we've never seen anything like it. It's got features of both acute leukemia and chronic, and your numbers are escalating by the hundreds, and if not thousands. We need to do something quickly." And I said, "Wow," because I'd never really been sick in my life. So this was a real shock. I'd never smoked, never taken drugs. I married a Oklahoma Baptist. So I'd never really even drank alcohol. And I'd always, tried to eat a good balanced diet, always exercise. And so this was a shock because I had none of what I thought would be the lifestyle indications of contracting cancer. And so I asked him, "How long do I have?" He said, "Well, if things don't change, 4 to 6 weeks." Well, my daughter was 14 at the time, and I don't know if you've been around 14-year-old girls lately, but they need their dad, or at least I was convinced they did. She did. And so after the shock wore off, I just did everything I possibly could to get better. And I was lucky enough to find a good oncologist in Oklahoma. He treated me very well. He kept wanting to do chemo and radiation, but I'd had so many clients that had done chemo and radiation, and even if they went into remission, they were living constantly with the after effects of this. And so this was the first time I stood up for myself and didn't just do what a doctor said. I said, "Doc, I really care about you. You've been very good to me. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I hope it doesn't come off that way, but I got a deal. This is my body we're talking about, and hopefully I've got a future. I don't want to do chemo or radiation if I absolutely positively don't have to. Can we put it off? And he said, yeah, but I wouldn't suggest it. And I asked him again, can we put it off? And he said, yeah, you'll have to come in for blood tests more often. Well, by the time, I should note that by the time I told him this, I had lapsed into chronic lymphocytic leukemia, which, like Aaron said, it's kind of one of the cancers that you want to have because it most of the time can buy you time to do some things about it. And a lot of times it's just about managing. So I told him, hey, I know I'm not managing it well. Let me try a little harder, make even some more lifestyle changes. And can we put it off? And he said, yeah, you'll have to come in for more frequent testing. And if the numbers get to this level, and he showed me the level, then I'm going to demand that we do. And so I agreed with that. And I was pretty sick for all of 2007. By the way we found out is I was going in for a total knee replacement and I went in for a blood test, and that's how they discovered I had leukemia. And so that was 3 days before Christmas in 2006. So it wasn't the best Christmas ever. And all of 2007, I was pretty sick. But by 2008, I was doing much better. I had made many lifestyle changes. I was sleeping for the first time in my life. My family jokes that if they would have had ADD back in the 60s, I'd have been heavily medicated. And so I never really slept. Give me 4 hours, I'm fine. But I'd read how the immune system absolutely needs 8 hours. And so I made sure to push myself for the first time in my life to double my sleep time to 8 hours, sometimes even 9. Made changes in my diet, and I'll talk about all that a little bit later. Was doing pretty well, even though my immune system was still pretty almost non-functional. And I got pneumonia in summer of 2008, almost died. It was the first time I woke up in the hospital not knowing how I'd gotten there and having a doctor tell me I almost died. Had that happen 4 times in my life. That was the first. And it was really hard getting over that. But finally, by 2009, I was doing well again. 2009 was great. And then August of 2010, my wife unexpectedly was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. And she had shown none of the signs until a week before. The week before, her face dropped on the right side, and she started losing all of her ability to move on that right side. So we took her in, and they found one of the largest the neurosurgeon said he'd ever seen. And with brain tumors, the ability to recover is usually dependent on 2 things: how high it is and how far forward the tumor is, and of course, how big it is. And hers was all the way back and down, wrapped around her brainstem with a lot of fingers and fissures. And so there was no way to operate whatsoever, even with laser-guided surgery. And so 52 days later, she was dead 15 days before our 30th anniversary. Ironically, I was considered a grief expert in the Midwest. Experiencing this absolutely devastated me. It's one thing to be afraid that you're going to die, but then to have a partner die and be absolutely powerless to do anything about it. And then also I realized since that we got married so young. I was only 21. I tell everybody I was 21 going on 12. And so my whole adult identity was built on being Mary's husband. It was a small, isolated town in Kansas. And so you kind of, in order to be one of them, you kind of got to have your parents or grandparents grow up there. Of course, mine didn't. So I was always Mary's husband. And to me, that was a good gig. But once Mary was gone, people were still calling me that. And I'd say, sadly, I'm not Mary's husband anymore. I just didn't know who I was. And things just spiraled from there. I became very depressed, very, what they call traumatically grief-stricken, and I couldn't sleep. I'd never really cried in my life, even about my own diagnosis, and I couldn't talk about the weather without crying, which was a real shock and another loss of control. And so it wasn't surprising to my oncologist that by October of 2011, 1 year later, the leukemia came back with a vengeance, and this time brought with it non-Hodgkin small cell lymphoma. And that was really aggressive as well. I decided to pack up and move from Kansas, even though my practice was thriving. Kansas without the cute Kansas little farm girl is just Kansas, and everything in this small town had a memory associated with it. I couldn't go anywhere without just thinking about the wonderful times and the great life that I'd had with her and now had lost. And so my daughter decided to come up to the Northwest to go to college, and I decided to come back home to Portland, thinking that that would be the miracle cure. Well, it wasn't. The last piece of my identity I had was my professional identity. It was now gone. My adult friends, even though most of them called me Mary's husband, at least they were friends, they were gone. And all I had was my few family members that were close. And I was renting for the first time in 30 years. Plus, I'd had many other major losses. In 2012, in order to show that I was gaining strength and strong again, I swam across a river in Oklahoma in August, not thinking about how it was just a petri dish for bacteria, accidentally swam through blue-green algae and woke up in the hospital having almost died from viral meningitis. I woke up, I had lesions all over my whole body. I had lost 60 pounds in 6 days because my fever had been so high. I couldn't read because my brain was so swollen for the first 4 days, which was shocking. I kept asking them, am I going to be able to read again? Am I going to be able to think again? And they said, well, we don't know, Dean. We just have to wait. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've lost everything. And now I've lost my mind. And so this is the state I came back to Oregon with. August of 2013, I'm dying. I'm down to 152 pounds. I looked like I had come out of Auschwitz. What you see today, I'm in what I call my fighting weight. I'm about 211, I'm 6'1", and 152 pounds. You can see every rib, you can see the bones in my pelvis, my clavicle. The biggest things on me were my lymph nodes under my jawline and what my oncologist lovingly called my hockey puck. It was the size and shape of a hockey puck under my right arm. Couldn't even put my right arm down. And I was done. I just had gotten to the end of my rope. And I thought, if I let the leukemia and lymphoma take me, nobody would know. I have had a great marriage. I've accomplished a lot. I hope I've helped a lot of people. I had written a book. It had done well. I'd accomplished everything I dreamed of. I thought, maybe it's time to just hang it up and slide on out of this life. And as soon as I thought that, the thought was followed up very quickly by the second shoe that dropped, and that is, your daughter just lost her mom. It would be entirely selfish to go out that way and leave her an orphan. Even at the age of 21, she's supposedly an adult, but she still seemed like a very young girl to me, one that had suffered greatly. And so I thought, what can I do to bring myself back? Well, thankfully, I was familiar with Viktor Frankl and his work. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian Jewish psychiatrist in the 30s and sadly got taken to Auschwitz. His whole purpose in life, he wanted to find out and discover what separated those that were able to persevere and overcome and those that weren't, especially during very traumatic circumstances. Well, he set up this thesis for his PhD, and he and his advisors decided it was unethical. There was no way they could put people under torment just to see how they reacted. And about a few weeks after he was in Auschwitz, the thought occurred to him, I didn't choose this, but this is exactly what I was hoping to do for my PhD. So he watched people and watched those who seemed to be able to persevere and those who started to fail quickly. Originally, his thesis or hypothesis was that those who came in strong and healthy, Olympic athlete types, would overcome it. But he saw them fail quickly and die. He found that it was all about purpose and how passionately you're tied to a purpose. And so he found that there were two main purposes for those that were in Auschwitz. One was to see your loved ones again. The other was to kill the Nazis. And the more passionately a person was tied to one of those two, or possibly an anomalous third, the more chance they had of persevering. And I knew that. And so for weeks, I would ask myself, what should my purpose be? But I couldn't get excited about anything. One of my favorite quotes is here. It says, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And it had been a very long time since I felt like I had any ability to choose my own way. I was still spiraling and drowning in despair. And after weeks of meditating and praying and asking for a sign, anything, and just hearing nothing but crickets, I looked around and I thought, I've lived in this dark little duplex for 6 months. Maybe I should unpack my boxes and decorate this place while I'm waiting on God or the universe to answer me. And so the first box I opened was a box of my childhood things my mom wanted to get rid of. And in it was a journal I'd been forced to keep in 6th grade as an 11-year-old boy. And if you would have known me as an 11-year-old boy keeping a journal, I would have to be forced to do that. And so I opened it up. I thought it'd be interesting to see what the 11-year-old dean had to say. So I opened this thing up, and the very first page, it says, when I get old, I gotta climb Mount Everest, swim the English Channel. That great adventure part of me was there that I had all but forgotten. And when I saw that, it was like an electric shock went through me. As a matter of fact, I'm getting goosebumps even now. I get them almost every time I talk about it. And I know it sounds crazy, but I thought, I got to do that. And my mind started spinning. And I thought, okay, I've known some guys who climbed Everest through my dad's friends, but my blood count's so bad, I don't think it could handle the elevation. Plus, my immune system's so bad, probably couldn't handle a meal in Kathmandu. I don't know. But I can swim the channel. I don't know why I thought so, but I did. And so I secretly started planning. I called my good doctor friend, Aaron Waters, who's just a gifted physician first. And I said, hey, Aaron, I finally found something that I can be passionate about. I'm going to swim the English Channel. No active cancer patient ever has. He's like, Dean, have you forgotten viral meningitis? Have you forgotten that you're really sick? Have you forgotten that you're 152 pounds? Have you forgotten that you're 54 years old? Have you forgotten that you're down and out and your immune system suppressed? I said, yeah, but doc, what do you want me to do? Die watching Wheel of Fortune, sitting on a couch? I'm not going to go out that way. If I'm going to go out, I want to go out swinging. He's like, okay, but promise me one thing. And I said, well, what's that? He said, it's going to make you look like a total dork. And I said, well, doc, I already do. That's not a problem. He said, but the reason you got viral meningitis is you didn't wear a nose plug and water went up through your nose, and there's a very permeable membrane there between your sinus cavity and your brain. Please wear a nose plug. Like, I can do that. So I got a nose plug, and the very next day I was in the gym. And when I kicked off the wall, because I'd done years, I was a triathlete all in the 80s and 90s. And so I'd done hundreds and hundreds of miles of laps. And when I pushed off the wall, it was the first time in 3 years I felt like myself again. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm on the right track. Until I turned and started to go back, and I was in such miserable shape and so sick, I couldn't make it a full lap. And so I hung on the side, breathed heavily, must have looked like I was going to have a heart attack, and made it back. The English Channel is 20 miles long, so I decided a lap is 2 lengths. I know I can't do 20 laps, but I can do 20 lengths. So that was my goal. Usually 10 laps takes me about 7 or 8 minutes. It took me an hour and 15 minutes that day. But when I got out, I almost felt like a new man. I had a purpose. I was doing something. I had something to strive for, something to think about other than everything that I'd lost. I very quickly decided that my choice was to live the rest of my life to inspire other cancer patients to refuse to give up by accomplishing the impossible. And the impossible became even more impossible. The fun thing was every day I tried to add 1 lap. By Thanksgiving, I was up to a full mile. All my numbers were going in the right direction. The oncologist was totally astonished. And you San Diegans will appreciate this. I came down, my oncologist at this time, couldn't find anybody I felt real comfortable with. And my dad actually had leukemia, and it had wonderful results coming down to University of California, San Diego, to just a gifted CLL researcher oncologist, Dr. Juanerio Castro. And so I would fly down there about 4 or 5 times a year and have calls with him when I wasn't flying down. And he was shocked because he said, Dean, I'll support you, but please don't do this. And I said, no, doc, I'm going to do it. He says, okay, I'll support you, but just understand it could go very, very wrong. And I said, well, it's already going very, very wrong. And so when all my numbers started going in the right direction and I started gaining weight and putting on muscle, he was shocked but thrilled, and so was I. By Christmas, I'm getting out of the pool, and the thought occurred to me, who cares if another middle-aged man puts on a Speedo and swims to France? It does the world no good. And in my case, it's not even a pretty picture. And so I wanted to, again, spend the rest of my life inspiring other cancer patients to refuse to give up. And I didn't know that doing the same old, I mean, so many people swim the English Channel every year, and it was a long ways away. I didn't know that it would really connect with others. And then I remembered when I was 24, I came back to Oregon for a bicycle race, and I'd done pretty well, finished in the top 20, was really happy. And so as a family, we had a big celebration picnic on the Willamette River. During when I grew up, the Willamette River was an oil slick. As a matter of fact, the big joke when I was in primary school was that if Jesus had chosen the Willamette to walk across the water, it wouldn't have been a miracle because it was so polluted and it was so slimy. But anyway, so by this time in the 70s, Oregon as a state had done a lot of environmental acts, and we were on the Willamette River at this picnic, and the river looked beautiful. There were fish jumping. It was blue and luxurious looking. There were waterfowl all around. And I looked at it. I looked at my dad and I said, has anybody ever swum this whole thing? And he's like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Where do you come up with this crap? And that was just enough to set the hook and set it pretty deeply. I thought, okay, if the old man thinks it's stupid, now I got to do it. Well, I had gotten back home and done the responsible thing and gave up that dream and got to work. But that came back 30 years later. And so I called the Leukemia Lymphoma Society to see if they wanted to partner with me on this. And believe it or not, I look back at it now, I can't believe they were excited about it. Here I was, 54, had leukemia and lymphoma, was losing my fight against cancer. I'd never won a swim race, never been on a swim team, and never swam a river. I was totally untested. This probably, in hindsight, it would have been a better idea if they would have said no. Thankfully, they didn't. And I just moved more and more every day toward accomplishing this dream because I thought, even if I died doing this, no one in history, and you got to remember, I was a history teacher, no one in history had ever done this. How many things on earth can you say that about? Here in this picture, if you look closely, it was the first day I started to swim. It was June 3rd, 2014. Looking at it now, you can see how sick I was. Then I thought I was the picture of health. I thought I was ripped because you can see a little bit of muscle, but mostly what you can see are the thick, swollen lymph nodes under my jowls and jawline. This is what I looked like when I started. And the reason I'm pointing that out is to show you, my dad heard me give this speech, and the joke ever since then is, Dean, you never were a pretty boy. But man, was I ugly with a capital Ugh. And I pointed out to show you that everybody, all my doctors, my mom even said it with tears in her eyes, please wait to do this till you're in remission, or at least in a place where you're doing well. I don't believe you should ever wait for your dreams. It took me 22 days swimming in 40-degree water. A lot of people don't realize Oregon's longest river is largely a snowmelt river. And it's one of the only rivers in North America that flows from south to north. I call it Mama River because it gave birth to my good health. But I called it that way before because not only is it Oregon's longest and largest river that goes through the state, but it comes down out of the mountains, goes through our 2 college towns, then cycles around, goes through our state capital of Salem. Then it's what fertilizes and has developed the Willamette Valley, the beautiful, rich farmland. Then it goes through our largest city, Portland, and then dumps into one of the largest rivers in North America, the Columbia. And it took me a long time to swim this river. I thought there would be a media frenzy. Nobody cared. We got a little bit of media coverage at first, but it was mostly pray for this guy, we think he's gone crazy type of articles. And then when I swam into Salem, that's the 100-mile mark, they started to take it seriously. The coolest thing about this is in order to swim a river, in order to stay safe, you have to have a kayaker in front of you. Because when you're swimming, the front crawl, you can see about 10 to 15 yards ahead of you and about a quarter mile ahead of you. But danger is always about 30 to 50 yards ahead of you. So the kayaker pulls the line, keeps you out of danger, stops you if real danger is coming. And the first 6 days especially, there was quite a bit of danger. And so we had 2 of the best river guides in Oregon join us as well. In order to have those kayakers, nobody wanted to take 3 to 4 weeks off work. And so I had a series of 6 kayakers. A month ahead of time, 4 out of the 6 kayakers quit. And so I was just scrambling, and I was talking to my dad about it. And you kind of got to understand who this man is. He climbed Mount Hood the first time when he was 9 years old. His father and his grandfather were both mountain climbers. He was a marathon runner. He's run most of the world's great marathons. He's climbed every mountain on the West Coast, many times. And so he's quite an adventurer. At this time, he was 79. And he says, well, I know what you need to do. And I said, well, what's that then? He's like, well, I'll do it. I'll be your guide. I said, Dad, you're 79. No problem. Dad, you've got cancer too. I can handle it. Dad, you've never been in a kayak. I'll learn. So that's what we did. We spent the next month doing practice swims on the river, getting him used to kayaking, getting me used to swimming behind it. And it developed such a beautiful experience for us. And then my mom, who was 79 as well, became what we called our shuttle bunny. She would drop us off, we'd swim, she'd meet us, pick us up. It became this family affair. And especially with my dad, we got 22 days, 24/7 together, experiences that we'll always be thankful for. So it was really a miracle. Albert Einstein said there are only two ways to live your life. One is as if nothing is a miracle. The other is as though everything is a miracle. The first time I saw this, I was still very sick. I hadn't started training yet. I cussed Einstein out. I thought, that guy doesn't know anything. That guy hasn't suffered like I've suffered. He was a Jew that had to escape Germany. I said, that guy, and this is where I caught myself, is just plain stupid. Okay, if you're calling Einstein stupid, it's not Einstein that's the stupid one. And I thought, he probably knew a little bit more about life than I do. What would happen if I took Viktor Frankl's idea that our last of human freedoms is to choose our attitude and make my attitude that everything is a miracle? It was a shockingly big leap that took a huge commitment towards, but that was the secret that really helped me not only swim this river, but get better. Radical remission, you may have heard about it. Bill was telling me that he's introduced it a couple times to this group. Kelly A. Turner was a researcher, and she was looking at cancer and cancer patients and kind of taking a new approach to Viktor Frankl. What helps cancer patients do well? What makes them do worse? What are the emotional and other lifestyle factors behind this? And she found that some people spontaneously get better. They go into what's called a radical remission. So she started looking for people all around the world and gathering them and interviewing them extensively. And she found 9 key factors. I had never heard of her until 2018. So I was cancer-free by then, but I saw her in a documentary, and it brought tears to my eyes because I had intuitively done all of the things that she suggests and has found that other radical remission folks routinely do. And for me, that's miraculous. The first one is changing diet. We hear about that a lot. I told you that I changed my diet. To be more specific, what I did is I got rid of all junk foods that had a lot of preservatives, got rid of most fried foods, got rid of most, if not all, sugar that I could prevent, got rid of anything that wasn't organic. And while I was still in Kansas, that was a real chore. And so I greatly changed my diet. I was still married to the Baptist, so I wasn't drinking any alcohol, but I just really upped my level of good, clean water. Taking control of your health, I intuitively started doing that when I left my Oklahoma doctor, my oncologist, came up here, and I had some pretty negative experiences with my first few oncologists. They were heavily pressuring me to do exactly what they wanted. And for the first 3, I'd say, you know, I don't want to be disrespectful, doc. I know you're a lot smarter than me, a lot more highly trained, but you don't have to live with your decisions. I do. And so here's what I'd like to suggest. I'm the boss of my body. I'm the captain. You're my expert consultant. The first one got really mad, slammed his clipboard down, told me he'd refer me. The second one was really nice, but told me he didn't work that way. The third one just said a flat no. Finally, I was looking around, and that's when I found Juan Ario Castro. And here's one of the most brilliant men I've ever met. And he just smiled and said, "Sure, Dean, that makes sense to me." So it's really important during your recovery that you are in the driver's seat of your health. Thirdly is following your intuition. That's something I've always kind of done. It comes out of my personality. Plus, I think doing all those adventures as a kid, uh, doing endurance events, you just have to learn to follow your gut instincts or it can get dangerous. The next one is using herbs and supplements. I didn't do that as much, but what I did do is I started juicing to get those natural vitamins straight from the vegetables into my body. One of the things I'd highly suggest is that you start juicing organic greens with a masticating juicer because it's a pain in the rear. It's painstaking. It takes time. But when you're dealing with cancer, I just looked at it as like I was preparing my own medication. And as soon as I started doing that, Dr. Castro looked at me and he's like, "Oh my gosh, this is working better than chemo for you." And I said, "Can I quote you on that?" And he said, "Absolutely not." But I guess I just did. He said, "What I'd rather say is that it's really, really being helpful for you, Dean." The next is releasing suppressed emotions. I had so many of those, and I had to learn to let those be felt and released. The human body is designed to feel and release. And most of the time, we American men are taught, God forbid, don't feel. And if you do, don't release it. So most of us are just chock full of latent, suppressed emotion. And the swimming, there's something called the blue mind. They found that when you're in, on, around, or by water, the brain goes to a rest state and starts to release suppressed emotion. They're now using blue mind theory for PTSD combat veterans as kind of a treatment of choice. They're getting them fly fishing or paddle boarding or surfing. And I found accidentally, intuitively, that the more I swam, particularly in the river, the better I felt, increasing positive emotions. The more active, most of the time, and there's all sorts of research that shows us, the more active we men are, the more likely we are to have positive emotions because we feel like we're in the driver's seat of our lives. Embracing social support. I'm not the guy that would have ever done that, except for from my family, because I like to be kind of private. But I couldn't be private as I was doing this fundraiser. And so I had many people from the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, doctors, other people that heard about it, even media influencers that rallied to help me. And I developed a fairly close connection with that community of supporters. And then deepening your own spiritual practices. The longer I swam, the more it changed the way I felt about everyone and everything, particularly nature. I had always seen nature like my own personal Disneyland. I had never seen the river or other animals in any way, shape, or form as other beings on earth that deserve as much respect as I do. My time on rivers has very, very much changed that. And it's changed how I feel about how I want to live on this earth and what I want to do while I'm here. There's also a 10th, that she found that she's included in her latest work called Radical Hope, and that's exercise. Well, I guess I don't need to tell you about how much I exercise. One day, when you least expect it, the great adventure finds you. None of us want to have cancer. I'm sorry you guys have had it, but there's still an adventure out there just waiting for you. And if you chase it, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be confusing. You'll think no one cares, but then the wheel turns and it finds you. So that's my story. I've blathered on probably too long. I usually don't do that when I'm working and talking in person. I love to entertain questions as we go through this, but I found remotely it makes things really difficult. So I'm open for any questions or comments you have now.
All right. How about a round of applause for Dean? Yeah, that was a great talk, and honestly, I'm not as familiar with radical remission as I should be, especially given Bill's introduction of the concept to us and stuff. But so many of those points that you brought up actually applied to me now that I kind of look at my treatment in hindsight. And yeah, water especially was just incredibly important to me. I mean, those times when we're completely stressed out, and I don't feel that I've met guys in this room that seem to be as stressed out as I was when I was first diagnosed and stuff. But I was lucky enough to have a therapist basically carry me through all of those 9 points without me even realizing it. And my meditative safe space was to think back to when I was a kid. I could just close my eyes and go back to the lake that my dad even grew up on, 80 years ago, and could just imagine myself floating there. And even though I wasn't actively in water at that moment, just the peace it brought over me, and thinking about it, actually healing me, that very well had as much to do with my treatment and recovery as everything that I dealt with from conventional treatment. So quickly have a question here from Stephen.
Yeah, I used to love doing laps in the pool before COVID. And then COVID came along and I couldn't go to the gym anymore. And now I'm having a hard time convincing my wife to let me go back. Have you found any way to prevent disease, common swimmer things that, and particularly like swimming in the surf here in San Diego, we get a lot of pollution like you were talking about.
Yeah, I wear a nose plug, and then I'm almost obsessive about cleanliness afterwards. I make sure to soak my goggles in alcohol, rub them down. Like you saw in that one picture, I was wearing a nose plug. Other swimmers look at me like, what are you, a 8-year-old? I don't care. It helps me stay healthy. If I'm in a pool or even swimming in a river where there isn't boat action, I will get wax earplugs and stick them in so I don't have water going into my ears. And then as soon as I get out, I rinse my mouth out with hydrogen peroxide. And when I get home, I take almost like a hazmat type shower. And that's kept me extremely healthy, and I'm rarely, if ever, sick, because one of the things that I do that I'll encourage all of you to do is become such a fad that if I heard about this now, I probably would wonder if the guy had lost his mind. But in order to get ready for the Willamette, and knowing that it's a snowmelt river and knowing that it was going to be 40 degrees, and 40 degrees sounds warm, until you remember it's only 8 degrees above freezing, and water saturates the human body quicker than anything. 40 degrees is kind of bone shakingly cold, particularly if you're going to be in it 8 to 10 hours a day. So I started taking ice baths. And those ice baths boost, they think, oh, I didn't tell you the biggest part, the biggest miracle of my story. First blood test I took after my Willamette swim, the leukemia was gone. And Juanario Castro said he'd never seen it because CLL is never supposed to go away. It's supposed to always be there. And he said that if he hadn't diagnosed me himself, he would think I'd been misdiagnosed, but there's no hint of leukemia in me now. And he thought there were a variety of factors, most of which was the constant hypothermic state. It was so cold that I would go into what's called thrombosis about every 30 to 45 minutes and have to get out of the river and run in place and do jumping jacks to warm up my body and then get back in and do it again. So for particularly the first 16 days, that was my life, and that was the hardest challenge, not knowing the whole time that that challenge was boosting my immune system through the roof and drawing my brown fat stores, which boost the immune system and burn out infection. So if you've heard of taking ice baths or cold plunging, I would encourage you to really think about it. And, you can contact me, I'll help you through it. But it's a really good way to stay healthy and boost your immune system as well. Again, kind of like Aaron said beforehand, I'm not a medical professional. I'm telling you my story and my results. Please make a good decision for yourself. But to answer your question, I wear the nose plug, do several things to wash and rinse my body, keep the swimsuit. I wash it almost every time after I'm done. I rarely go to pools anymore. I've got this one river only 13 minutes away from me, the Clackamas, that I swim half a mile to a mile down. Then I call it the training of truth. I turn around and swim back upstream. I get about 10 yards stroke going down and about an inch coming back up. So I use it for mental training because even to this day, I just did it yesterday. I've been doing it for 3 years. My brain will scream, "You're not going to make it back." And learning how to turn that down, I think, is really good for resiliency. But the Clackamas has a higher water quality than the drinking water in France. So I don't worry about it too much, even though I still take the same precautions. I'd much rather swim in a river or an ocean, someplace natural if the pollution isn't too high, than in a pool any day.
So, and was that comparison made when they found benzene in the Perrier water in France?
Yeah.
I just want to follow up about the Radical Remission book. I loved that book so much. I made a little summary of it. It's 4 pages, and I can email it to you.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Yeah, and
more
the
questions
book
here
that I was referencing is called Blue Mind by Wallace J. Nichols, and I think he lives down by San Diego as well. It was a New York Times bestseller, I think, in 2012. Great book, a lot of good science.
Great. Thanks for that recommendation, too. Any more questions from the audience? All right.
When you talk to the physician, a medically trained person, how did they explain to themselves sudden remission?
I'm sorry, what was the last word? How did they explain to themselves?
The sudden remission would defy their understanding of a medical practice, medical cure. And so when they're confronted with what you did, how do they explain it to themselves in medical terms?
Yeah, I've never really had that discussion. Most of them won't discuss it with me. They, as a matter of fact, I just got a new PCP here that I had to let go because I told him my story. And he said, well, Dean, you still have CLL. And I said, no, I don't. And this was remote. This was our first remote visit. And he said, yes, you do. CLL never goes away. And I said, well, Dr. Castro was considered in the top 5 of CLL researchers. He said I didn't have it. We've got the blood test to show it. He diagnosed me as CLL, charted it. It's now in my chart. Never saw me in person, never looked up my history, never looked at Castro's notes, didn't give me a blood test. So I've had some real pushback from some what I would call somewhat neglectful physicians, oncologists, but most of them are wonderful. But a lot of them, even Dr. Castro doesn't want to talk to me about it. He said it's an anomaly. It's not something people can count on. He's happy that it happened to me, but he thinks he didn't use the word fluke, but that's what it sounded like he was referring to me. Yeah, so I
Well, Dean,
really
I'm
haven't gotten to have that conversation with any of them because they're not interested in having it with me.
Yeah, well, and I remember, as Dean said, you either think nothing is a miracle or everything is a miracle, and I think we know what many doctors have the mindset of. But I'm glad that you brought up that point about the hypothermia while swimming, because I think that one of my takeaways from my radiation and ADT treatment was the fact that they're trying to damage the cells and starve them at the same time. And, when you look into, there was, what just happened to come out on Netflix right as I was undertaking ADT was a lot of documentaries about fasting and how people would actually fast, not this intermittent fasting overnight, but fasting for an entire week, and how it ends up, starving the cancer cells. Those cells are replicating so quickly they don't have anything in reserve, and so they're going to be the first ones that starve to death when you are putting your body through so much stress that a body is intended to go through. Not the stress that we have when we go to work and our boss yells at us, but it's really interesting to think about. That is potentially your 22 days of radiation treatment instead. You were, affecting those cells that way.
And starving out,
go ahead.
I think that's a good thing to call it, Aaron. By the time I got about 160 miles, this Dr. Aaron, my good friend, came out because he just wanted to check on me, make sure that I was okay. He brought with him his skin fold caliper test, and my percentage of body fat after 16 days was down to 3%. So he required I take 2 days off and do nothing but eat and sleep and try to gain a bit of weight. And so there was definitely, because of the heavy output of exercise, there was definitely that kind of starvation going on in my body.
More questions? See some hands. All right, Stephen.
Another question on the diet. You don't have any particular standard diet that we could go by? Like, I'm on a ketogenic diet.
Yeah, I basically
no
am
sugar.
on the same, Steve. Basically a ketogenic diet with I juice organic greens with some ginger and turmeric, and then I throw in 1 Granny Smith apple because the enzymes and the acid from the apple unlock some of the proteins from the organic greens. And it's supposed to be good for blood cancers, so that's why I started doing that. But that's basically the diet that I follow.
Do you eat much red meat anymore?
Not much. I love my red meat. All those years living in Kansas cattle country. But I actually lived in Dodge City, Kansas for 3 years, believe it or not. So yeah, I like my red meat, but I limit it to about once or twice a week. We get so much good natural seafood up here that I supplement it with that.
That's true. Yeah, the salmon in Oregon is quite good, right?
Salmon, trout, yeah.
Any other questions here? Okay.
Thanks. First of all, Mr. Hall, I'd just like to thank you for your talk. For me personally, it was very inspirational. The don't give up and don't, just take what the doctor says and go with it, for me are lived experience and also inspirational. So I just appreciate that. The question I have is, what juicer do you use? What brand of juicer?
Yeah. Right now, what is the brand? Omega juicer. Just it looks like an old 1950. I've had it for 12 years now. Just nearly beat it to death, and it's practically bomb proof. I think it's an Omega 3. It's just looks like a 1950s stainless steel kitchen appliance.
And for those not familiar with it, can you explain what masticating means?
Well, it sounds dirty, but it's not. Masticating means to chew, and rather than whip at your juice, it just kind of crunches and chews the juice out of it. It's a slow process, but by going slowly, you don't heat up the juice that burns out all the proteins and enzymes, or you don't whip air into it, which also kind of negates any of the good qualities in the juice. So by taking a little extra time, you get what I call the pure blood of the vegetable.
But there's also still plenty of fiber included, right? It doesn't separate the juice from it.
Not so much. No, not in mine. And, there's been a lot of talk lately about how you need that fiber and all that other stuff. Well, yeah, but when I'm juicing, as much, you should see the heap, the mound of vegetables that I'm juicing. There's no way I want that much fiber in my body. And I get the fiber in just my regular diet through my organic vegetables. What I want to do is super fuel my bloodstream with just all that pure protein and enzymes from the juice itself. Yeah, it's kind of like saying, and this, do you want to drink the blood or eat the meat? A lot of times that blood from the juice is, I feel, what has really given me the boost in terms of my immune system. I can feel a lift almost immediately. And beware, if you start doing this, it's going to cause a lot of detox and die-off in your body. When I first started it, I had flu-like symptoms for about 2 weeks. It was hard to get to the point where it was fun to do. But I'd heard and read quite a bit about the die-off and the detoxing process, and anybody that has cancer is going to have that, and probably fairly severely. So be ready for that and read up on it.
And can you tell us again, what were the additional things that you added? I think you said turmeric and a couple other things you added to the juice.
Turmeric, ginger, sometimes parsley, almost always lemon. And then, but for years and years, all I did was kale and spinach and Granny Smith apples. The turmeric, the ginger, those have blood purification qualities. So I've added those, but mostly just for the taste, because when you're only doing kale and spinach and Granny Smith apples, I called it my swamp water. But I treated it like it was medication, and I thought, if this helps me and helps me to live for my daughter, I'll do anything. But you kind of got to get to that point. You're not drinking it for fun.
Yeah, that is a good point. One other prostate cancer patient back when I was going through treatment had sworn over carrots. Just completely inundate your body with carrots till you turn orange. And you can pretty much only do that by juicing.
Right.
Obviously, that's very different than the dark greens that I think today is being more important. And the one caution I was given by my my acupuncturist about doing that is that the amount of sugar included in the carrots is a bit too much. That's why I was wondering about what you added to it. For me, I added cinnamon, which is supposedly helps even out the glucose level in your blood after taking something like that. But I don't think you have that same problem with the recipe that you had.
No, I don't, but cinnamon sounds like a wonderful addition. I never thought about that. Thank you. Yeah, no, I started out with carrots as well because I'd read a lot about it. I think it was Jack LaLanne that was really big on apples and carrots, but I found myself going hypoglycemic because I had such little body weight already. And the I didn't realize how much sugar carrots had in them. So I quit that.
One more question here.
I was wondering if you could talk about how much the belief system helps in your regiment. I happen to believe that if people are very religious and believe in it, then it will help them. But if they don't, people that don't will not help them. How much does, for you, I think, believe in exercise and swimming, I think it really helped you. What do you think of that?
Yeah, being a therapist, I know the power of belief systems and the story that we tell ourselves. One of the things I found is that we have an entirely new body. Every cell in our body sloughs off and regenerates every 15 to 18 months. And so one of the things I did is I would spend every night meditating, imagining my cancer cells sloughing off, being regenerated by good, healthy ones. I would see myself becoming well and strong. And I just believed that I had to do everything I could to stay on this earth for my daughter. That was my heavy belief system. I was raised a very conservative Christian. And so I have that background, but I have moved more into what I would call a faith-based belief system that I don't talk about much. I tell everybody my spirituality is kind of like my sexuality. I really enjoy it. It's really a big part of my life, but it's not something I talk about. But I believe that belief system's huge. And the big belief, there were two main that I told you that changed everything for me. I believed that Viktor Frankl had it worse than I did. And sadly, it's nice to know that somebody did. And so every day that I was having a tough time, I would tell myself, I'm not in Auschwitz. I got it better than Vic. Thanks, Vic. I would say that even out loud. The second was when I ran across Einstein's thought that everything's a miracle. And I made a wholehearted belief. The only thing that I couldn't get my head around, and I still have a tough time doing, is that my wife dying was somehow miraculous. I have decided I'm not high enough on the pay grade spiritually or intellectually to understand that. It has created miracles. I never would have swam a river. I never would have lived a life. I'd have been back there in that small town, probably still scraping away, doing my best. So it has totally transformed and changed my life. But to this day, when I hit a tough time, when I don't get good news, or even when I'm irritated because the guy in front of me is texting instead of going through a green light, I've got a default, what I call a reboot question that's a belief that stimulates that belief that everything is a miracle. I'll say, what is the miracle in this? Almost always I get an immediate answer. And even if I don't, I can feel my body settle down. So there's something to that. And I think having your belief system that's reasonable and powerful to you is extremely important.
That's an excellent note. And I think, we have one more question here.
When my mother had breast cancer in 1980, I got a Norwalk juicer, and we recently brought out some things that have been in cupboards because we're moving, and I found a Norwalk juicer, and I wondered if it still exists and if you can still get a parts. A few parts may be missing from mine, and I wondered if anyone else knew about it.
Yeah, one vote for the internet here for finding all those repair parts. Yeah.
You talked about your diet, but on the list of 9 items, you had also written supplements. Any particular supplements that you can talk about?
Yeah, there's all sorts of research that shows vitamin C is really effective at killing cancer. And so I took a semi-liquid form, still do, called lipospheric vitamin C. Again, it's horrible tasting, but I always tell myself it probably tastes better than chemo. So, I just treat it like medication. But that was the only other one that I really spent a lot of time on while I was still, a cancer patient.
Yeah, vitamin D is certainly one for boosting our immune systems.
No, I
any
said
last
vitamin
questions?
C. Vitamin C.
Oh, sorry. Can you give us the letter again?
C as in cat or Curtis.
Ah, sorry. Yes, vitamin
Yeah.
C. Yes. Linus Pauling's favorite, I believe.
Lipospheric vitamin C. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that correction. I guess if we don't have any more questions. Oh, one more question, actually.
The opportunity to hold a microphone. Hey, thank you. That was an excellent presentation, one of the best I've heard. You're a dynamic speaker, so thank you so much. Since you mentioned supplements and you only focused on vitamin C, I mean, that's sort of strange. You take any other vitamins, supplements, herbs? You mentioned herbs and supplements outside of the juicing. And as Aaron mentioned, vitamin D seems to be a big one mentioned to us with prostate cancer. So do you take multivitamins or herbs, CoQ10, or all of these nutraceuticals, as they call them, that are really hyped? So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think if they're really good, well-manufactured, well-processed supplements, then I would really encourage you to take them. I would not encourage you to go to a bargain store and buy cheap vitamins because they found that many times those cheap ones, especially if they're in pill form, they don't digest. You've probably seen the x-rays of people with tons of vitamins in their stomach or in their digestive tract. Right now, and for the last few years, I've been taking Athletic Greens daily, which comes in powder form, and I found it really boosts me and helps me. And then I also take vitamin D, as in Dean, because there was a lot of publicity during COVID that is a real help and assistance to not getting COVID. So I've added those, but I'm talking about when I was an active cancer patient. That's what I was doing. Mostly, quite honestly, because I was broke. I'd spent over $500,000 out of pocket on medical bills. And I just didn't have money to spend on vitamins. I do now.
Yeah, and I also do want to point out, re-emphasize what Dean said. I had been suggested to take selenium and vitamin E together back when I was diagnosed with thyroid issues. And vitamin E is very controversial. That combination has been found to increase the chances of prostate cancer. So, hey, no surprise that I'm standing up here then as a result. There's different forms of vitamin E. There is very natural as well as a synthetic, and they found that it's that synthetic form
which is very easy to find, and it's very hard to find the real natural stuff. So it's pretty much, you can't find it except going to one of these real specialty stores, though I don't take that anymore. All right, any more questions? I guess, yeah, let's wrap up the meeting then, and another round of applause for Dean. That really was a fantastic presentation.
Well, thanks. And if I could make a plug for my book, we've just written the book of my 22-day journey, and we put it in a new narrative form. It's called Braided Interview. We took everybody that was on the team and interviewed them, and then we interweaved those interviews together so it creates the narration. It reads much more like a documentary watches, and it's a real easy read. Only takes usually a couple sittings, and it's gotten some high ratings. If you want to hear more about the actual swim and the beautiful things that happen during that, you can get The Wild Cure: From Death to Life on Oregon's Longest River on Amazon.
We'll have to add that to our library so people can see it here at our meetings. Again, thanks a lot, Dean.
Okay,
one last thing from Stephen, though.